Hi, everyone. Welcome to our live event. My name is Cynthia Ryan, and I have the privilege of serving as chair of IPAC Nova Scotia. And on behalf of my colleagues at the Institute of Public Administration Canada, I'm very pleased to welcome you all here for what will be an exciting presentation and panel discussion with thought leaders and practitioners who have been and continue working through evolving workplace cultures. We are going to start our event with a short presentation to set some context, and then we'll get right into our panel discussion. If time allows, we may be able to take a couple of questions from the audience. If you have a question you'd like to ask, just enter it into the chat on YouTube. Now, I'd like to introduce our presenter for the exciting session we have ahead of us, Kavita Sharma, an executive director at EY. She has worked exclusively in the public sector in Alberta, BC, as well as in Nova Scotia. She has worked specifically on large-scale transformation programs in the areas of change management, designing people strategies, and supporting organizations to evolve their ways of working to support future talent and retention objectives. Thanks for sharing today, Kavita. Over to you.
Thank you so much, and hello and welcome to our session on driving retention, attraction, and innovation with a digitally enabled workforce. We are so delighted to be here with you today for what we hope is an insightful and engaging experience for you. We're going to bring to you today some insights from EY's Digital State Workforce Report and have some meaningful conversations with an incredible panel of leaders who will bring to you a combination of lived experiences as well as expertise in thought leadership and leading practices from organizations like yours. As leaders in the public sector, you appreciate the unique environment we are operating in today as we balance the need to stimulate our workforce and provide a purposeful and highly interconnected work environment while respecting employees' growth needs, levels of comfort with change, and a balance between work and personal commitments. You also, as professionals, are looking at ways to reshape or hone your talent agenda through a lens of looking at how best to provide a more digitized and efficient service, not just to your customers, but also to the citizens who we ultimately serve. So in the past few years, I think it's fair to say that we've seen dramatic shifts in the ways that we work and in ways that we think about work as well. Today, our HR leaders in the public sector are not just being asked to do more with less, but they are being challenged to grow talent, to retain talent, and to recruit meaningfully. Employees have different expectations of work today, with culture, purpose, digital skills, learning being at the forefront of the expectations that they have of their employers. The COVID-19 pandemic also has accelerated these trends and caused significant workforce transitions. We have seen those who value working at home, wanting to retain their privacy and enjoying the opportunity to work flexibly. We have seen those who desire to return to the office, excited to once again have a sense of normalcy. And we have seen those employees who enjoy a hybrid lifestyle and want options on when and where they work. The government and public sector have not been immune to these pressures and expectations from employees. In fact, you continue to be, challenged with a lot of these issues. Based on our research, we have identified 4 main talent trends that are really impacting government and the public sector. They are the hybrid workplace, resignation tsunami, technological disruption, and the need for upskilling or reskilling of the workforce. So let's begin with the hybrid workforce. With the COVID-19 pandemic, we saw a sudden shift to hybrid, and many cases fully remote working. Nowadays, the expectation is actually hybrid, which places the burden on leaders to mandate a different return to office policy. From EY's Digital State Workforce Report, it was noted that 77% of public servants surveyed want to work remotely for a minimum of 2.8 days per week. And 57% thought it was important that their employer has a flexible work policy. Many employees today reject the working expectations that we had even 5 years ago of being in the office all the time. and believe that hybrid is a standard for the future. Industries within the public sector that have traditionally been more challenged to change, so in healthcare, social assistance, and educational services, are having difficulty satisfying the desire of these employees who are looking for a hybrid workforce. But these organizations must redefine new ways of working that meet the needs of employees and preserve the talent pipeline and future workforce expectations of these institutions. And finally, in an age of polarizing perspectives of us versus them cultures, how should leaders reimagine hybrid workplaces with the end goal of retention, growth, and innovation? Add to that the importance of creating a sense of belonging through DEI initiatives, community initiatives, as well as the expectations increasingly being voiced by a multi-generational workforce. The next one is around a resignation tsunami. So in this trend, we are seeing unprecedented movement in the labor market, not just the great resignation, but you've probably also heard of silent quitting. 29% of public servants say they are likely to leave their jobs in the next 12 months. And the main reason for that is increased pay, better career advancement, and flexibility with hybrid working. So with these stats, it's imperative for government and public sector leaders to understand what their workforce values the most to combat the attrition and to keep your high performance employees. The market right now is bold, and employee wants and desires are increasingly becoming non-negotiables and challenging HR executives to offer different incentives to retain the workforce. The third key trend that we're seeing is around technological disruption. So we've seen significant technology-driven advances and new digital trends that have really transformed the way governments operate, the way they make policies, the way they deliver services and improve outcomes for their citizens and communities. With this rapid pace, employees are asking for enhanced digital fluency. They want to replace old ways of working with better, faster, more efficient systems. And they also want to know that their skills can be adapted to changing environmental and economic circumstances. The final key trend is really around upskilling and reskilling the workforce. The evolving skill needs are forcing the public sector to refocus on how to upskill and reskill their workforce in real time. The new digital age is not just about the technology anymore, but how we enable our people to adapt to the new digital age. And so that's a combination of both hard and soft skills. And when I kind of refer to soft skills, it's things around agile leadership. It's around managing through ambiguity. It's around servant leadership and leading purposefully. Within government, we're seeing that 40% of the core skills of public servants are going to need to change within the next 5 years. And 48% of public servants will require at least 3 months of upskilling or reskilling. So with these four key talent trends impacting government and public sector, how can we drive retention, attraction, and innovation? Our panel is going to provide some perspectives, and we would also love to hear from you. But first, what we'd like to do is a quick poll, so a Menti, which is what we call it, to better understand from you which one of these key talent trends is impacting your workplace the most. So Diana, I'm going to ask you to thank you for putting up the Menti, and we'll just give you all a few minutes just to enter your information. You can see up there, it's menti.com, and the code is up there as well. And please let us know if you're having any trouble accessing it. So hybrid workforce absolutely is top of mind for so many people, as well as technological disruption. They almost kind of go hand in hand in lots of ways. It's interesting to see that a lot of these trends are actually quite interdependent. So it may not be that it's just one, trend that you're seeing. There are actually, they do have impacts and dependencies upon each other. So we'll probably just give about 30 more seconds. So it is interesting to see sort of the upskilling is lower, but definitely I think hybrid is top of mind for everybody. So thank you so much for those who participated in this quick Menti. Diana, I'll ask you to go back to the slides, please. Thank you so much. So the last slide that we talked about in terms of the key trends really set the stage for the trends that we're seeing in the market. But what we are learning, though, is that retention of employees is really about redefining what an exceptional work experience looks like for them. It's more personalized and is also more purposeful. It addresses that disconnected employee challenge and puts public sector leaders really in the driver's seat to create and to reimagine a talent agenda, which places your workforce at the center of the change. So, how can we uplift and digitally enable an empowered workforce? Through three key areas. First is by creating a culture of agile learning. And that really is about placing people and their development at the center of the transformation by providing high quality, on demand learning that is aligned with your organization's desired outcomes and expectations of the citizens that you serve. We know that digital skills are in short supply across all sectors. A 2022 survey revealed that 3/4 of respondents, so that's 76% globally, don't feel equipped with the digital skills needed for the workplace of the future. We also learned that every single public sector worker needs greater digital literacy to understand technology's potential, to adapt to new tools and ways of working, and to use data insights that are generated through digital means for more strategic work. The public servant of the future will require a much broader set of capabilities than merely those relating to technology. In this high-tech world, more advanced human, social, emotional, and cognitive skills are becoming increasingly critical. In fact, the top 3 skills in demand for government and public sector workers today includes leadership and social influence, complex problem solving, analytical thinking, and innovation. So building a culture of agile learning means debunking traditional learning and placing an emphasis on high quality, in-demand learning in microbytes or in sessions with immediately applicable and relevant tools and skills that will help empower and really build the confidence of employees and allow them to gain the critical knowledge and experience which is in demand. The second key way that we can drive retention, attraction, and innovation is really around tailoring a purposeful experience. So building a connection for the employees to their organization from the time that they are hired to the time that they leave. We know that employees across all generations, they're sharing with us the fact that, especially in the public sector, they're looking for opportunities to feel connected to broader departmental goals, to be motivated and incented, to be innovative and creative, to learn to shadow other functions, and to really feel part of a bigger mandate. The virtual and remote nature of work within the public sector has really shifted the center of gravity to increase connection, choice, and engagement. One of the things that we did learn in our survey is that 29% of respondents said that the struggle to keep existing talent was among the top 3 barriers to obtaining the digital and tech-related skills that an organization needs. And a crucial way to tackle this is really to attract new talent is to provide that outstanding employee experience. This means creating fulfilling and rewarding jobs, configuring modern digital-driven hybrid workplaces, and really providing that sense of purpose that employees are increasingly seeking every day of their lives. The final one is around enhancing digital leadership. So really about challenging sort of our HR leaders and executives to invest in building strong leadership behaviors and technical skills. and really considering this opportunity from, as part of their development and recruitment goals. We know that successful digital transformation calls for a new breed of leader. So there is a move now from more traditional leadership to agile leadership. And rather than just sort of pushing technology onto business functions, we're seeing digital leaders increasingly really consulting more with a wide range of staff, from departmental leaders to frontline employees, to understand their operational challenges and work with these teams to co-design solutions driven by digitization and better use of data. When leaders invest in building these strong capabilities as well as these progressive behaviors in the workplace through digitization, it is possible to do more with the same, because employees have the capacity and the support to make meaningful contributions to the organization. So building digital knowledge and confidence is important across all roles and levels of the public service. It's no longer just relegated to IT functions. So these three areas of focus are heavily, as I mentioned, interconnected and integrated. And it's important to have all of them to really achieve an able, empowered, and digital workforce. These topics are also top of mind for many executive agendas in the public service. Just as a quick example, I worked recently with a Crown Corporation whose CEO saw the impact of COVID-19 on her leaders and workforce. COVID had challenged traditional hierarchies and ways of working and created a real restlessness with her leaders and workforce as they had to lean down, which often meant that training learning programs were canceled. Coming out of COVID, she saw a dispassionate workforce. So recognizing that need to retain talent and not being able to compensate them higher, she embarked on a journey with her executives to build a culture of agile learning, to create purposeful experiences and increase digital fluency through a people strategy. The result of that was a more interconnected and efficient organization, one where diversity was respected, as was the ability to learn fluidly. So before I turn this over to the panel discussion, just wanted to quickly touch on the benefits of actually driving retention, attraction, and innovation through these key areas. So if we could go to the next slide, please. So building an enabled, empowered, and digital workforce offers many organizational benefits, as you can see through these testimonials. And just quickly, if you take a look at the yellow box on the right-hand side, the UK was one of the first countries to launch a digital skills academy for public servants to develop new digital skills and map out new career paths. The program offered bespoke learning to meet the specific requirements of departments and employee wants, driving talent management, recruitment, and retention, and by tailoring a purposeful experience for employees. The UK department excelled and soared in terms of meeting their goals. The next one is the Australian Digital Health Agency, and they invested in technology transformations and enhanced digital leadership to adopt better ways of working. Strong digital leadership enabled and empowered employees to do their jobs better, and they invested significantly in digital tools and created more flexibility in the organization. And the final one is about Estonia. Estonia started going digital 25 years ago and has recently shifted from a focus to technology and engineering to a design focus. As a result of encouraging and supporting experimentation and digitization, Estonia's public sector has the knowledge and skills to be a successful digital organization. So these success stories are just a fraction of what's possible. To deep dive into recruitment, retention, and innovation, I'd like to now hand this over to the moderator of our esteemed panel, Kelsey Ryu. Kelsey is a senior manager from EY's Halifax office. She works with organizations to prepare their people for their future through change and talent strategies. Kelsey believes that the future may be driven from a transformation, changes in strategy and environment, or new ways of working, all of which require careful consideration of retention, learning, and employee experience objectives. Kelsey, over to you.
Great, thanks so much, Kavita. I now have the pleasure of introducing our panelists for today. First up, we have Nancy Kennedy. Nancy is the Chief Lottery and Customer Care Officer at Ontario Lottery and Gaming. where she's responsible for driving value and growth within OLG's lottery business and has oversight of the company's enterprise customer experience function. She also serves as the president of the Interprovincial Lottery Corporation that administers Lotto 649, Lotto Max, and Daily Grand. Prior to joining OLG, Nancy had a long-standing career in the Ontario Public Service, where she served in a range of portfolios up to the level of Deputy Minister. Welcome, Nancy. Next, we have Chris Hattie. Chris Hattie is the Acting Assistant Vice President of Human Resources at Dalhousie University here in Halifax, one of Canada's premier post-secondary institutions. In this role, Chris oversees a team of 50 HR professionals providing a full range of services for Dalhousie's 7,000 faculty and staff. Welcome, Chris. Next up, we have Marcia Andrews. Marcia, based out of Halifax as well, is the director of RBC's Contingent Workforce Management Program, where her team is responsible for the sourcing, onboarding, and payment of over 12,000 contingent workers globally. She brings over 15 years of people leadership, recruitment strategy, and change management experience, and has previously worked as a leader of recruitment for RBC in the Atlantic region, and a branch leader during the early days of the pandemic. Welcome, Marcia. And last but not least, we have Kat Lee. Kat is a partner in EY's People Advisory Services practice and one of EY's global advisors on agility, bringing a background of behavioral change, leadership development, and culture. She works with leaders and teams to shift to new and practical ways of working. She was also the lead writer for a New York Times business bestseller, As One, Individual Action, Collective Power, on the topic of leadership, culture, and strategy. Welcome, Kat. So this panel is not necessarily all public sector, but I think all of our panelists will have some interesting insights for you listeners today. Diving into the conversation, we've heard thus far through the conversation today many trends that are impacting workforces. Of note, in the recent past, we have organizations moving towards a more digitally enabled way of working, in particular coming out of the pandemic and reaching that new normal. I'd like to hear from each of you on this, but maybe we can start with Nancy. Interested in understanding what role digital plays in your current employee experience and your customer experience at OLG.
Thanks so much, Kelsey. Thanks for inviting me, and I really appreciate the question. So if you can indulge me for a moment, I'd just like to back up a bit and tell you a bit about OLG and a bit about our journey over the last few years. OLG is a Crown agency under the Ministry of Finance, Government of Ontario. We're a gaming entertainment agency, about $8 billion in top line revenue. And backing up a bit prior to the pandemic, where we were as an organization is our digital business was very nascent. We were very traditional Crown. And from the employee side, fairly command and control culture, fair bit of hierarchy. Everybody came into the office. We have two sites, one in Sault Ste. Marie, one in Toronto. And at that time, I had been in a different part of the organization. We did a employee engagement survey, the first one we had done in 7 years. It wasn't a regular practice of ours. And the results came back and they were abysmal. It was about 57% at the engagement level. And the feedback was, we don't understand where the company's going. We had just been through a big privatization effort on our land-based side. We don't have a strong sense of purpose, and we don't feel we're getting enough feedback or communications from leadership. And probably one of the most damning things, there was a bunch of qualitative comments in the survey, was I remember reading something that said, leaders don't say hi to me in the elevator. That was
probably not something you want to read on a survey response.
No, you feel like you have to pour yourself a scotch on a Friday night. Reading that. It was just really, so really at that point, I got asked to go into the senior vice president position of people and culture by the former CEO because of my background in the Ontario Public Service. And when you start a job, my advice is it couldn't really get any worse. So when you go in, it can only go up. And at that point, the government also took a policy decision to open up the online gaming market to competition. So this was make or break it for OLG. We had to respond to our employees, attract potentially hundreds of people to come in and build our digital business with limited compensation levers And the only thing we could do was improve our culture. And then the pandemic happened. And what I would say about the pandemic is it was terrible, right? It was hard to go through. There was a sense of emergency, very traumatic for people, but it was almost a gift to us because it allowed us to change our culture completely and gave us permission to change things and disrupt things in a way that we couldn't. And we had to actually disrupt everything. We changed leadership at the top of the house. We, as leaders, had to kind of have a come to Jesus moment where we said, what are we doing wrong? We had to go back to that employee engagement survey and go back to staff with great humility and say, what do you need from us? At the same time, the pandemic allowed us to build credibility back with our team. We protected them. We went to them and we tried to communicate almost every other day to say, this is exactly what's happening. This is what we know. And so that helped us build a bridge back with our employees and trust because the trust had been broken. And then what we did, knowing that, we had to cut over to a whole new platform, technology-wise, to enable our new digital business. We brought in actually EY to help us with our transformation. And from the employee, we were at a point where we had to recruit 150, 200 new people to build our digital business. And we developed our kind of game on strategy where we had to be very clear about our business objectives, what it meant to be a digital company, do an assessment of our workforce about what skills do we have, because a lot of people had more digital skills than we thought. So we undertook a whole kind of workforce planning exercise. And we were very clear about our purpose and our values, which we call our OLG truths, about what was the value proposition of working here. And not only did we have to say it, we had to enable it so it was true. So when you work at OLG, if you're not, one of our truths is you play as one team. And if you don't do that, you can't work here. That's the kind of, so we had to change almost everything. And it wasn't for the faint of heart. And it meant that some people didn't want to stay in the organization because it was becoming faster to compete, more technology. We also put in place a digital academy with the help of EY to upskill our staff, to make it to provide opportunity. So I could go on about this, but I would just say we've, for us, digital has become not just a division, it's at the center of who we are.
It sounds like it's certainly woven throughout the fabric of the organization in many ways.
Yeah, and as a public sector organization, again, we couldn't just go out and buy talent. We had to create a place where people wanted to work and where they wanted to be.
Okay, perfect. I know I think we'll be getting into some more of those examples throughout the conversation. Maybe turning over to Chris, would be interested to hear from the perspective of Dal, what role digital plays in your employee and customer experience. I know similar to what Nancy has voiced, pre-pandemic, Dal is primarily in-person type service, but certainly the pandemic brought some significant changes with regards to digital.
I'm seeing something in the chat that there might be some feedback. Is anyone else receiving that?
A little bit.
Let me just... Is it still there?
Yeah, I think you're sounding a little bit more clear now.
Okay, sorry about that. Not sure what was causing that. I think, like Nancy, I see the impacts of the pandemic and this move towards a more digital workplace as being really intrinsically connected. And certainly, as you talk about, clients are our students, and the way that students learn and interact with the university has been fundamentally disrupted by the pandemic. And I think, thinking back to just about this time 3 years ago, as the world went through such an incredible shift, and as an institution, our leadership was really concerned about, how we would have business continuity, how we would offer our core services, how we would maintain our workforce through this. It was really incredibly fascinating to watch just how adaptable and innovative and able to shift new ways of working and learning were across the institution. We moved through the pandemic, and I think have ended up in in place that really is our new normal, much more effectively. And this isn't just a Dalhousie thing. I think it's the entire sector, both the public sector and the university sector. We've really learned that people are much more, ingenious and able to adapt than perhaps we gave them credit for. And so really we're in a space now where this digital workplace has really changed how we do our individual work, how we collaborate with teams, and then of course how we serve our clients, which are predominantly our students. The thing that I think has affected my work as sort of a people leader and an HR specialist the most is really this idea of how people want to work and the strong push that we see across our workforce for the ability to have more flexibility in the how, when, and where they do their work. And for me, the most important takeaway has really been to think about these trends not from the perspective of moving towards hybrid work, but people wanting to work from home and really focusing on this idea of flexible work. I think the biggest mistake that organizations have made and that we've worked really hard to avoid is you're replacing a previous way of doing work with something that's equally as rigid. We might be hybrid, but you're being told that you must be in the office, these 2 days, you must do your work in this way. And I don't think that's really responding to how people's perception of work and what they're looking for the workplace really is. I really think it's about flexibility and this desire to have more ownership and control over the how, when, and where you work. And obviously technology has been a huge driver in both the perceptions that people have that are driving those desires and our ability as an organization to be responsive to that.
Great, thanks, Chris. Interested, Marcia, I know RBC is quite a large organization in many places, so presumably there was quite a bit of collaboration across locations within RBC, but interested now to understand where RBC falls from a digital perspective with regards to employee experience, as well as customer experience, and if there's been any kind of significant changes resulting from the pandemic. I know you used to work as a branch leader in those early days, so got to experience kind of the effect on the front line. But if you could tell us a little bit more about that, that would be great.
Yeah, thanks, Kelsey, and hello, everyone. I would say that RBC was on the path to being a digital enabled organization before the pandemic, but the pandemic just really amplified it, and we had to move quickly because we were on the front line as an essential service, and we had to keep our doors open and still find a way to serve our clients. So it's still has been a huge change in the way we serve our client and what that experience is. I think we're all familiar with a lot of the day-to-day transactions being done digitally now, either on our phone or at an ATM. And clients are coming into the retail branches for different things that they used to. Like it's more about complex service questions that they have that they can't do themselves or figure out online, or really difficult problem resolution, or that specialized advice. So they're coming in for different reasons than what they were before. And we'll always have our loyal clients who want to come in and see us face to face to cash that check. But those times are few and far between. So it's really, we had to think differently about how we take advantage of those in-person moments to add value and give that advice, because we're seeing the clients face to face less frequently now. And from an employee experience, what it's really done is the roles have evolved. The strategy of the roles have changed from being client service focused to being more advisors. So we really needed to change up our learning and create that capability and capacity for the team, especially the client facing teams, to focus more on advice, solving those complex issues and problems that they were seeing in front of them, and enable them through skills development. So the one thing that has been really a big change for us this past year is, as an organization, we implemented Workday, which has really changed our HR function. And we actually launched it just about a year ago, March 16th. It rings true in a lot of people's minds in HR because it was just such a change. And we've been able to really automate a lot of our old manual processes. But it also happened during a time where, resignation and attrition was high across the bank, not only in the business groups we support, but also across HR. And we had to learn quickly. And I think one of the positives of having that new technology at our fingertips is really the learning platform, where we were able to equip the team with on-demand learning to upskill them in the areas that they needed to. and it created that flexibility. So maybe they didn't want to do their learning during the day. Maybe they wanted to do it in the evening or on, the commute to work. So it just allowed them to do it wherever and whenever they want it. So overall, I think, not only the way we serve our clients changed, but the way we, do a lot of our employee experience transactions has changed as well.
Interesting. It sounds like hearing a lot of similarities around flexibility and kind of giving different options and allowing employees to almost make some choices. So when they learn, how they access learning, how they work, how they connect into the workplace. And Kat, interested just based on some of the things we've heard so far, are you seeing consistent themes within clients that you're working with or trends within the sector?
Thanks, Kelsey. Maybe one observation that I'll make just based on my panelists' comments as well is when we think about the new normal, I think we should all give ourselves a little pat on the back. Let's remember how much significant change that we've actually gone through. I think just one of the reflections and quotes that we often heard during the pandemic was that we've accomplished in 3 months what would have taken 3 years of transformation. And so all that to say is that as I listened to my panelists' stories and insights, one theme that came up is really that digital has a different definition for different organizations. And that, as we've really gone through the pandemic, the overarching role that digital has played, its definition itself hasn't changed that much. Make my life better. Let's help. How do we make work more efficient? Help me improve an employee, student, or citizen experience. But now it's on steroids because of that degree of change. The theme I'll also bring back that Kavita mentioned is a renaissance, let's say, to the people aspect. So we've transformed digitally around upgrading our platforms, but now how do we help upgrade the people? And maybe just two examples, themes that I'll share that are a bit adjacent to the future of work and hybrid discussion that we've started talking about is, when we talk about, for example, reskilling, equipping our workforce differently, now that the platforms are in place, and let's talk about like data and AI for greater business intelligence, what we're really saying is now that employees are getting access to that data, how are they rewiring and how are we helping them rewire the way that they make decisions day to day for the business? So there is a learning aspect, and there's a different expectation of a mindset of employees and how we're working and how they're working. And the other slightly adjacent theme is if we take a step back and I'll say looking at how organizations are thinking differently about their ecosystem and partnerships to solve problems they couldn't solve before. So I think a great example that many folks on this call would be involved in are smart cities. Wi-Fi for everyone, access to improved mobility, human services. It's a digital enablement way of thinking around solving complex problems that we couldn't solve before. So those are I'll say just a few adjacent themes, but very similar themes that we're talking about and seeing.
Very interesting, Kat. Thanks for those insights. I know we will be talking a little bit more about learning, and that's been mentioned so far in a couple instances, and kind of how we help our employees move through this change. But starting kind of at the beginning of the employee life cycle, I'd like to ask the first question to Chris and followed by Marcia. So interested to hear a little bit more about how this digital enablement has changed the competencies and skills that you look for when you're recruiting. So Kat mentioned a couple skills and a couple kind of new ways of working or things that we need to enable employees to be able to work in this new way. But from a recruiting process, what is different now about what you were looking for, say, 5 or 10 years ago from a competencies and skills perspective? Chris, maybe I'll turn it over to you to start.
Sure. I mean, I think it can all really be summed up by the concept of adaptability. So much has changed over the past 3 years, and we're still going to see such significant change in our jobs. And that change is going to come rapidly. Digital is a huge part of that, but we're also seeing, for example, continued shifts in what students are looking for out of university and out of the services that they access and how they access those services. So I really think that one of the key things to be looking for from kind of a recruitment perspective is not hiring people who are specialists in one skill or one kind of function, but people that have the adaptability to contribute to the organization successfully in different ways that will evolve and change as our organization evolves and change. The related piece of that is, I think, it's easy to talk about, the technological side of using new technology, or that kind of more the hard skills that go along with it. But there's a huge soft skill as well that goes along with these changes that we're going through. And I think what we've seen is, as we have meetings and communicate in different ways, people's ability to have sort of the EQ and the soft skills to use those different mediums effectively, creates a lot of potential pratfalls in the workplace. So for me, looking at people with really strong communication skills and strong EQ, even for roles that have a high technical component, is becoming increasingly important. So those are the two kind of functional competencies I think are really critical. The other major change in the types of candidates that we're looking for, I think, is a product of all the things that we talked about at the start, including this tightening labor market and the challenges of finding high-skill employees, and the need to really broaden sort of what we look for as an ideal employee. We're having less and less examples of finding that what I would call the plug and play, or that perfect candidate who has the exact skills and experience and training to come in and do the job. So we have to be thinking more of an organization about how do we find people that have the right fit for our organization that we can then train up or build into effective employees. That's certainly included looking at more internal promotions versus always looking external for candidates. And then there's also, I think, a huge component of this that really intersects with our EDIA goals as an organization, which are incredibly important to Dalhousie. As we, one really, I think, prominent example that we're currently looking at is alternative forms of experience. How do we look at people with resumes and backgrounds that might not fit the exact mold of education, experience, and training that we're looking for, and more people that bring diverse backgrounds and different ways of learning and knowing into the organization. I think that helps us broaden our candidate pool, and it also has a huge benefit in terms of our ability to attract and retain a more diverse workforce as well.
Thanks, Chris. Interested to hear from you, Marcia, on this one as well. How has the kind of shift to digital changed what you're looking for in the recruitment process and the types of candidates that you're looking for now?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think the main change has really been about that flexibility and eagerness to learn, especially if we're thinking about our client-facing positions. So really a focus on client education and being able to demonstrate and leverage technology to create that memorable client experience. So looking for people who have that capability or that eagerness to learn. Also, the problem solving, the people skills are so critically important. And just building those strong relationships with our clients. So I think there was always a touch of those elements before, but now there's just a stronger emphasis on them. Also, just obviously RBC has other, platforms other than our personal and commercial banking arm. And I think some of the other critical skills that we're looking for, over the past year or so is really around the digital space, creative and design skills, developers, and as Kat was saying, just around the importance around data and insights and providing that back to our business groups that we support to make informed decisions. So data, reporting, analytics, just the ability to tell that story and share those insights. So there's a lot of different groups that we support that are requiring those skill sets more than they were before. In terms of the recruitment process and the way we attract talent, I don't think it's changed drastically. other than we just needed to ensure we still had that multi-channel approach and not just relying on our brand and the applications coming in the door. So we continued to lean into our early talent, leveraging the campuses and in the areas that we operate, marketing campaigns, direct sourcing. Employee referral program at RBC is huge. We get so many great talent from people who work with us. And then recruitment events. I guess the one shift would be to be more virtual events. Whereas, pre-pandemic, we would hold a virtual event and have very few attendees, but now that seems to be the preference, and it allows us to broaden our reach and tell our story. My work is in our contingent workforce management space at RBC, and we have had business groups like our advice centers, our contact centers, who were struggling to fill those frontline service roles, as many folks in the service industry have been the past year or so. And they look to us to help support them and look at bringing in a contractor strategy to help fill the roles that they critically needed to fill, and help support the recruitment teams that were experiencing very high volumes. So we have seen a few different business groups look to a contingent workforce to help fill some gaps, which they traditionally wouldn't have before. I think where we still, I'll just say one more thing. I think where we're still trying to figure it out is around like our work arrangements or our staffing arrangements. Yes, and some regional offices or office type roles, we've been able to maintain that hybrid model, that flexibility. Sure, we're still trying to figure out the culture piece, creating that sense of belonging where everybody's not there at the same time like they once were. But I think where we're still trying to find the right solution that works for us is those frontline client service roles where you do have to be at the physical location all the time, and trying to find ways to still add that element of flexibility for the workforce to make it more attractive and to retain them. So that's an area we haven't fully figured out yet, but something that's definitely top of mind.
Interesting. Nancy, you mentioned a little bit about Learning Academy at the beginning, and I'd like to now dive in a little bit more into that topic and hear a little bit about how you're helping to equip your employees to kind of meet that speed of change and to work in these new, more innovative, more digitally driven ways. If you could tell us a little bit more about what OLG is doing here, that'd be great.
Yeah, maybe just to start, in my mind, there's kind of big A, agile, and training for that. So kind of agile when you're building a product or a tech project, which has a very specific meaning. And then there's just small a, agile, which means speed, being faster and kind of being a bit more innovative. And so I guess we tried to tackle both. And when it comes to, say, big A and learning that kind of skill, we changed how we delivered all our technology projects and moved from a waterfall approach to an agile approach. And that took not only hiring people who understood that methodology and working with consultants to do that, but we provided staff with agile coaching, and we invested quite heavily in that all the way up to the leadership level. Very worth the investment. And we also developed this Agile Digital Academy, which is more basic kind of agile sort of skills and terminology. So people who wanted to, say, upskill to get a job in our digital division in other parts of the company could do so, and has sort of a badge system, and people kind of get trained. So we put all of that together. In terms of just the changes that were happening, the speed of the world, we also invested very heavily in our change management function as we were going through this whole transformation of our business, and everything coming out of the pandemic. It's very rattling for people, I would say. And the organization was going through so much change that people really needed, I think, to be walked through that in very kind of, change management, I think, has provided a fair bit of stability and rigor around that. I would finally say, just in terms of being more agile in general, how we work has changed from being more hierarchy-based, huge teams, a bit bureaucratic, to having sort of smaller groups of people with more decision-making autonomy and saying it's okay to fail at something and then to fix it. That wasn't the culture that we had before. That's taken a lot of shifting of ideology. And believe me, we're not all the way there yet. This is a journey that doesn't stop when you have a long-standing Crown agency that's been working in a particular way for 30 years and getting people comfortable with everything that's happened, right? So we're kind of still on that journey right now in terms of trying to get faster and more. It's coming, right? But that takes time too. And it's sort of, what I would say from a leadership perspective is not losing momentum or giving up on it, because you can really slide back into the old way of working almost in a nanosecond if you allow it. So you have to kind of continually get up every day and saying, we're in a new world.
World of constant change.
Yeah.
Whether we like it or not.
That's right. So that's a bit about what we did formally. And just the cultural piece is a constant, it's like an orchid. Culture is like an orchid. You have to tend to it every day or else it wilts.
And Kat, interested to hear a little bit from you in this space with your kind of agile expertise. What are you seeing from workplaces as they're trying to equip their employees to work in these more agile, innovative ways? Any tactics that you're able to share?
Sure. What came to mind for me when I heard both Marcia and Chris speak, as well as Nancy, is connecting the dots around. So why are we looking internally to rewire and support our people? What I heard from Chris and Marcia is really about that. We talked about it's a candidates market. Extrinsic levers alone really aren't enough to get the most out of what we need from our organization to engage, motivate, incentivize, and create that sense of belonging. So in order for us to really be able to deliver on the aggressive transformations that we've undergone and continue to deliver on those goals, we really have to think about how we can do things differently within an organization. And I think even in the very beginning of this call, how are we looking to do more with less, was something that someone said. And I loved the way Nancy spoke about the system of what OLG is doing, and to create some parallels around, a case that EY has been supporting on the UK civil service, which we'll say it shows agility at scale. Is also, you'll see similar things, and I'll walk through some of the key anchors, but it's an organization of about 500,000 who are trying to solve this problem of agility and learning agility and culture change. And they produced a digital skills report at the end of last year, and the worrying stat, I would say, and I don't think anyone will be surprised, was that only 40% of the people that were surveyed, so this was across digital, data, technology, and IT professionals, only 40% believe their departments had the skills and resources they needed to digitally transform the services that they deliver. And so similar to what Marcia mentioned, lack of skills in AI, machine learning, automation, data compliance, security. And the big themes for the UK Civil Service was around legacy technology, budget constraints, and a lack of training were the top barriers for them, they felt, to really transform. So they said, okay, let's address the skills and training challenge. And very similar to what Nancy mentioned about both I'll just call it a top down, so a leadership led and a bottoms up approach to thinking about learning and learning agility. So building in a culture of learning by measuring learning demand and being able to map learning objectives to business outcomes. So they knew that the learning that was being developed, the learning paths, the capabilities that were being closed were grounded in business priorities. The easy, then second pillar, was really about getting the learning content stood up. So what's tough is that it's the hyper personalization that people spoke about. It has to be relevant. It has to come more as a pull than a push. But the UK Civil Service used an ecosystem of providers to be able to help create that more hyper-personalized, customized approach. To Nancy's point around digital leadership, the UK Civil Service has also invested in a significant amount in coaching for digital transformation and leadership agility. And then the fourth is that ecosystem slash kind of systemic structure of career paths. So that was the last one, where they created and anchored learning experiences in both individuals' career goals, but were focused on closing specific organizational capability gaps. So all that to say is it's a large transformation learning agility that the UK Civil Service is undergoing, but it's a great example of that systemic view and digital learning at scale.
Thanks, Kat. Chris, I know that when we previously spoke, I know that Dalhousie is doing some work in this kind of career pathing space and offering some, different ways of learning and building the skills of employees. If you could tell us a little bit more about that and kind of how that's contributing to the employee experience at Dal.
For sure. And I think, obviously creating a positive employee experience and clearly defining an employee value proposition is so critical in the current sort of climate of competition for labor. But, for us, and I think Kat just did a great job of explaining sort of the business case for career development and career pathing in terms of achieving the needs of the organization. But I do think it's a critical part also of retention. And I think we're in a space where basically retention and career development are almost synonyms, where the best way that you're going to retain great staff is to make sure that they understand how they have, the opportunities for great career growth within the organization. The times of someone, sitting at the same desk, doing the same job for 35 years, getting their, watch on and their pension are kind of gone. You need to be able to grow employees and provide those great opportunities. So for us, we've looked at career pathing within our organization, which is quite complex in terms of how you move, given just the broad types of roles that we have and the decentralized structure, as really being a 3 kind of stage process, starting with what can we do as an organization to help people find their spark or know what their career goals are. So offering programming that we do internally that give people access to, whether it's certain types of, testing and quizzes or other forms of development to help them figure out, this is where I'd like to go. These are the types of roles that interest me, is kind of the first stage. And then the second stage is what we've been doing a lot of work in, which we talked about earlier, Kelsey, which is how do we help people get the skills and the learning and development opportunities, not just for the role they're currently in, but for what they see as their future career opportunities as well. And we really leveraged the fact that we are, a university to achieve this. Doing less learning and development. That's your typical, HR professionals offering you a session on learning this type of software, this type of kind of strategy, and more using our open learning and continuing education division to build kind of more education focused and higher ed focused training and development, micro credentials around things like project management or enhancing culture or change management, and really thinking about our internal ability to offer micro credentialing and in some cases, up to, master's degrees, and really building a lot of our learning and development and career development around, what we can offer by being an institution of higher ed. Then from there, it's the third prong, which as a public sector organization, I'm sure many people would relate to, which is, the complexity of having people access new opportunities in a space that can be, highly unionized and very policy driven in terms of how you do postings, how you move people through kind of different roles. So really starting to work with union partners around, thinking about things like internal transfers, secondment opportunities, being able to waive posting requirements where certain factors have been met, and really trying to think about a more kind of strategic approach to succession planning that, there are a lot of barriers have historically existed from us being able to do, but trying to slowly break some of those down and really make this career development something that's not just a great importance to the institution, but to our employees as well.
Excellent. Marcia, interested on the employee experience and work that's being done there at RBC. Broadly, how are you creating purposeful and meaningful employee experiences for your employees?
we recently had we did a lot of research and have launched our new employee value proposition. And I'm just going to read one line because I think it really resonates with me as an employee, and I can see where it's really driving a lot of the work that we're doing right now. So it says, you want to be an employer that helps you want an employer that helps you realize your vision for life with a meaningful career, a workplace that supports your desire for more. It's not just about your career, it's about your life. And you want a company that will support you achieving your life goals, not just your career goals. So I think a lot of the strategies and programs that we're putting out right now is really about well-being, benefits, total rewards. Like, yes, we have a lot of those that are really great, but it's also about creating that sense of belonging with your team, with the company, and the community that you live in. So I think for us, it's trying to get it right on day one and really thinking about that onboarding experience, because we're such a large company. There's so many different platforms to find information. It can be very overwhelming. So we're trying to simplify it. We have one platform now where employees can go through to find out anything they want about career development, performance, benefits. So we've really tried to make things simple. And I think the Launch Your Workday helped that. But in terms of creating that sense of belonging, we have several employee resource groups, which provide such a great opportunity for employees to get involved and meet others that have a similar passion that they do or an area of interest. It allows them to take on work maybe outside of their day-to-day role that really allow them to drive impact outside of their position, broader impact across the region or Canada. We have a few other, I guess, annual events or programs that we do that's focused on, like Diversity and Inclusion Week, where there's several different sessions, a lot of learning happens, a lot of networking happens, and these are all virtual that every employee across Atlantic and beyond can be a part of. And then we also have a Career Development Week, where we have different sessions led by all the different teams across, let's say, Atlantic, and employees can join and just learn and network. And so I think it's back to just sharing information about what's out there, what's possible, because everybody has different interests. And it's just laying it out there in a simple way so they can pick and choose where they want to learn more and get more involved and hopefully strengthen that sense of belonging so that we can retain them. We also have put a higher focus on people manager development and just developing resilient leaders who can inspire high performance, but also enable their teams to learn and grow and innovate. So really, we've put a lot of focus into programming for people managers. And then also just around the future of work. We have a large team that is trying to solve this puzzle, and that puzzle that balances that flexibility and performance of the organization. So I think that's still something that's always ongoing and evolving, but has a huge impact to the employee experience as well.
Excellent. And it sounds like many of the things that you mentioned kind of, I guess, more easily delivered or enabled through digital. Are you finding that with, you mentioned Workday, are you finding that with more digital, you're more easily able to connect with employees, offer them options and ways to kind of find their belonging in a way that suits them?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, like it's like our workforce, like if I talk specifically just for the Atlantic region, it's so dispersed. We have people in little pockets all across Atlantic Canada. So having this digital platform that's able to connect everybody, it's just more inclusive. So that's definitely been a plus for sure.
Great. Heard a couple references to leaders during that conversation, and I know leaders came up earlier during your previous response, Nancy. If you could tell us a little bit more about kind of what OLG is doing to attract, develop, and retain leaders, as they do play such a critical role in building a culture and providing that purposeful employee experience and ultimately retaining valuable employees.
Yeah, maybe what I would say is to start, I think when I think of what we would value as competencies in leaders 5 years ago and what we look for now, they're very different. So when I think about leadership that we would have looked for in this organization for the top tier of it, you'd want a strong individual sort of characteristics like a strong business knowledge, intellectual capability, hard driving, results driven. Those are the kind of things that I think help people advance in the organization. I think now, given everything we've all been through, it's hard for leaders, by the way. The expectations are very high. I think Chris referred to adaptability. And that is one of the key things that I think we look for. Flexibility. You want somebody to be, obviously understand the business and be intellectually focused on that, but it is the softer side in terms of dealing with the adaptability of change, the emotional fallout of change, the resiliency you need to see people through times like the pandemic, because this will not be the last type of event like this we go through in the next even 5 to 10 years. When you think of a climate change world, pandemics, all kinds of things that people are dealing with. So the things that we look for in terms of our leadership have really, really changed. And trying to get people to develop those skills, the types of training or support that they need is different too. And so again, I talked about, trying to, for our leaders, we have invested a lot in coaching, just even for their own well-being in the positions that they're in, because it's been so hard to lead in this environment. And that's been a big part of retaining leaders, because I think they feel that the company has their best interests at heart and cares about them as people. You really have to get down to that level, I think, to retain your leadership. You have to recognize what they need individually as a person.
Interesting. Are there any particular programs that you're using at OLG?
Yeah, we have an executive coaching program that we have put in place for all of our executives. And I think we also spend a fair time with coaching ourselves as an executive team in how we interact with each other. And when I talked about the culture that we're trying to create, we have to demonstrate those values at the top of the organization. And that means tough conversations, and collegiality is really important, but being collegial doesn't mean that you always see everything the same way. So having a kind of space, we talk about safe spaces, we talk about actually calling things out. That's new language for us, right? As opposed to, and dealing with challenges up front, that's part of agility, right? So that you don't bury sort of things. You actually kind of get a move on and sort of table it and then move on to the next thing. So kind of developing that kind of interaction has been, a fair lift. It's a change.
Yeah, a change indeed. Kat, interested to hear your perspective on this one as well, on the topic of leaders. If you're seeing anything interesting from a attraction, development, and retention perspective.
There are 3 areas. We've been talking about leadership kind of attributes, capabilities, skills. And there are 3 areas when we think about agility that play an important role. It's around decision-making, prioritization, and that building of that trust and psychological safety as a leadership team and that dynamic. I'll I guess double click into the decision-making aspect. And if there was anything that has really demonstrated over the pandemic that was successful for leaders to accomplish as much as we did, it is that their ability to delegate the authority and move out of the way of their people and teams to give their people and teams the decision-making authority over the work that they're doing. So we spoke to a variety of leaders during the pandemic, and what they said was they prioritized their key decisions that they and only they needed to make. So when, spring 2020, when survival was at stake, how did people get so much done? It's because they really focused on the things and decisions they needed to make, and then let the others make the decisions that they were in control of. And the reason that this is really important from an agility perspective is the number one problem. I think many of us would say that that we see or that we experience is that decision making is either done by consensus or it's very authoritarian, hierarchical. And in both cases, that flow of work slows down, it creates bottlenecks, and things don't happen, things don't get done. So all of that to say is, from a leadership perspective, when we talk to organizations and teams about agility, it's to that point around feeling comfortable to let go, trust your teams to use their judgment, and be okay if things don't go perfectly. So it is that fine balance, those guardrails, to be able to say, what can I let go of, what can I make decisions on, but being able to make sure that the teams feel safe and are safe, psychologically safe, with the decisions that are being made.
Great. Thanks, Kat. We're hitting around the end of our panel time, and I think there's been some really great insights from all the panelists, and I'm sure the listeners are taking some note and perhaps planning some next steps, but I'm sure that it can be quite daunting to think about what is your next step, in particular if you might be earlier on in your digital journey. So before we kind of close off the panel, I'd like to ask one question from each of our panelists, which is, what is one thing that you would suggest listeners do to enable an empowered and digital workforce? So if they could only do one thing to start, what would that be? And maybe I'll do in reverse order from my initial question. I'll start with Kat.
Oh, no, sounds good. What I would say is that, just with the context of newer generations, they want to say in their work, equity, transparency, flexibility, autonomy. I'd say the one thing that we could try to do to empower is to remind ourselves to trust the judgment of the people who are doing the work, because I would say no one knows the work better than those that are doing it. So how do we build that trust with them?
Okay. Marcia.
I think for me, it would just be getting back to the basics and really ensuring people managers are equipped to have those meaningful career development conversations and help support employees with a plan to develop those future-ready skills that are so important to them, but also important to us. And just really enable them to continue to add value and do the meaningful work that they really want to do. So I think it's just back to the basics and ensuring the people managers are having those important conversations and supporting the team.
Okay. Chris, what about you?
My answer, comes right along with Marcia's, which is invest in management skills development. I think some of the hardest kind of challenges to adapt to new ways of working have been for people leaders and people in managerial and supervisory roles, whether it's how do we measure performance of a hybrid workforce, how do we build community when people are working in different ways, how do we communicate a vision for our team. It's become more and more challenging to be an effective and skilled manager. And I think a lot of the things that Marcia just said, and also the kind of advice that Nancy and Kat gave for senior leaders, really applies to that kind of, I guess, what is traditionally called the mid kind of level managers as well. So really investing in creating really great management skills and building those within your team, I think, is one of the most important things we can do.
Okay. Great. Nancy.
I think it's really important to have a very strong strategy for your business or organization, complete with goals that can be cascaded down a bit, like Marcia was saying, to your employees and managers, so they all understand what expectations are. And beyond that high level, supporting that with very clear sense of what your values are as an organization about how you want people to act in your organization to support that. And beyond that, I'm with Kat, get out of the way and let people do what they need to do that. Give them the autonomy to be successful. And so they can only do that if they know what your expectations are and the guardrails are, so that they feel safe in doing so.
Great, thanks so much. So we've reached the end of our planned discussion. There is just one question that came in the chat, so perhaps I'll ask that out for a response to the group, and I'll pass it over to Kavita to wrap us up. There's a question that talks about upskilling and some potential kind of negative connotation around that, a way for employers to ask more of existing employees without compensating them financially. Would just be interested maybe to hear from one of the panelists, kind of what's your definition of upskilling, and how would you respond to this kind of criticism of how this is being used as a term? Chris, would you like to give it a first stab?
I think Nancy has something to say too. Didn't mean to interrupt, but I think it's a bit of a technocratic answer, but like many public sector organizations, a large amount of our compensation is still based around a relatively archaic job evaluation system. And I think a lot of the kind of tensions that you're seeing with this question relate back to how job evaluation is done and the fact that it plays such a predominant way in how we compensate people in the public sector. I think, the traditional way of talking about job evaluation is, we rate the position, not the person. But when you're asking people to upskill, to take on new tasks, to adapt their job in a way that far outpaces the ability to put a job through a traditional evaluation kind of review, you need to rethink, our compensation mix. So at Dalhousie, for us, that's meant really thinking about other ways of compensating employees that doesn't throw out job evaluation and that importance of internal equity, but starts looking at performance-based pay, merit pay, recognizing when people take on additional tasks, projects, or acting roles, and also being more adaptive to the market, and particularly in professions. Good example is, chartered accountants, where, if we were basing it all on our internal, job evaluation system, we would never be able to hire a professional accountant again. So I think a huge part of it is rethinking our compensation mix and recognizing that job evaluation has some limitations to it, even within the public sector.
Great answer, Chris. Nancy, do you have something to add?
Yeah, it builds a bit on what Chris was saying. Like often when I think of our digital jobs and our digital division, they are more highly classified than other areas of the company. And there's a range of reasons for that. And I think that when we talk about upskilling, it's not about loading on extra work to people. It's actually trying to train our staff for the jobs of the future so they have a job. Because we are doing a ton of hiring at OLG, but it's in this particular area. So if people want to go up a classification level and make more money, it works for them to sort of go through our digital academy, and they have an opportunity to apply for one of these positions. So really, it's not about trying to load people down. It's actually trying to make sure that they can participate in the company of the future.
Okay, thanks so much. On that note, I will hand it over to Kavita to wrap up the conversation.
Great. Thank you so much, Kelsey. And thank you so much to all of the panelists. You have just provided such amazing insights in terms of both your experiences and also sort of reflecting back onto, your own journeys over the last couple of years where you are today. So thank you so much for your insights and for your experiences. I will always remember to think about culture as an orchid, because I think that's absolutely, Nancy, a beautiful way to put it. So to Marcia and Chris and Nancy and Kat, thank you so very much. We are at the end of our session, so I'm just going to hand it over to Cynthia, who is going to do just some final words. So Cynthia, over to you.
Hi, everyone. Me again. Sorry, I couldn't get myself off mute in this digital world, right? Thanks, everyone. I just echo Kavita's messages as well. And I thank you all for participating in our conversation today. It's been a wonderful discussion. And I want to thank everybody who tuned in over YouTube and also our question asker in our YouTube chat. So thank you very much for that question. This is actually the first of a 4-part series that we're doing with EY, in partnership with EY. So please stay tuned for some future events, hopefully in person once we're out of this winter season as well. And just a quick reminder that we do have an IPAC Leadership Summit coming up on Thursday. So if you're not a member or you're not registered for the summit, I encourage you to check out both of those opportunities. And you can also do that through our website. So we look forward to having you back at our next event. And again, thank you to our panelists, and thanks for everyone who tuned in today. And we'll see you again soon. Bye, everyone.
Thanks.